Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Charlie. On today's episode, I'm going to be showing y'all how to make my delicious bourbon glazed ribs. Now, these ribs can be made with either pork spare ribs or beef ribs. We first start off by taking the ribs, we clean them, we cut them, we trim off the excess fat, and from there it is seasoned and marinated in bourbon overnight. The next day, they're baked into the oven until the ribs are nice and tender, and after the ribs are baked, they're coated with a sweet and savory bourbon sauce just before serving. This recipe, you can get about 6 pieces of ribs, so that's enough to serve about 6 people, or you can serve less depending on how many people you're serving. It's savory, sweet, nice bourbon flavor, and it's going to make you forget about the barbecue ribs. Absolutely delicious. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, here's all you'll need to make your homemade bourbon glazed ribs. Let's get started with our ingredients. You'll need 3.5 pounds of pork spare ribs, bourbon whiskey, soy sauce, rice cooking wine, mesquite liquid smoke, honey, vegetable canola or olive oil, brown sugar, cornstarch, and for your seasonings, you'll need some salt, black pepper, Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning. If you don't have this, you can use the Zatarain's Creole seasoning or the Slap Your Mama Cajun seasoning. You will also need some Chef Paul Prud'homme's Pork and Veal Magic, granulated onion, granulated garlic, crushed red pepper, and some ground ginger. And for your tools, you will need some aluminum foil, a large fork, and to bake your ribs, you will need an 11 by 17 inch baking pan. And there we have it. Alright, let's get straight to it. We're going to get started by flipping the ribs over. And on the back of the ribs, there should be a membrane, but some parts of the membrane on this set of ribs have been removed and some of it is still there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip the ribs right back over because the membrane is a little tough to remove, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Alright, now as you can see here on the side of the ribs, here there's the bones on the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the ribs. We're going to cut in between every two bones. We're just going to cut through the rib with the knife, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. And it's a little bit tough to cut through the bone here. You got to have patience with it. So just keep cutting through it. And what I've done is that after a certain period of cutting, I just take the part of the rib and I just broke it in half, and that was it. But as you get more towards the end of the ribs, it's a little bit more easy to cut through. So be very patient with it. And there we go. Add your rib pieces into this strainer. Rinse the rib pieces off with cold water. Okay, let's get started with marinating our ribs. I place my rib pieces into this large bowl. Add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 teaspoons of Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning, 2 teaspoons of Chef Paul Prud'homme's Pork and Veal Magic, 2 teaspoons of granulated onion, 2 teaspoons of granulated garlic, 2 tablespoons of liquid smoke, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, and 1/4 cup of bourbon whiskey. Take your hands and coat the seasonings and the whiskey onto the rib pieces. I'm going to cover this. Place this into your refrigerator for about 4 to 8 hours, or if you're a patient guy like myself, I'm going to let the ribs sit in the fridge overnight. Alright, let's get started with the thickening agent for our bourbon sauce. So in this measuring cup, I've added 2/3 cup of cool water, and to that I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. I'm going to take my whisk and stir this until combined. Preheat your fire to medium heat. Alright, let's get started with assembling and cooking our bourbon sauce. So in this small pot, add your thickening agent right on in there. And to that, I'm going to add 3/4 cup of bourbon whiskey, 5 teaspoons of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of rice cooking wine, 2 tablespoons of honey, 4 tablespoons of brown sugar, a half a teaspoon of granulated onion, a half a teaspoon of granulated garlic, 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. I'm going to take my whisk and stir all the ingredients together until combined. Let this simmer for 7 minutes, stirring occasionally. Alright, it's been about 7 minutes now, and our mixture has thickened, and our bourbon sauce is done. Now you're going to go ahead and turn your fire off. Let this cool completely. So here I have an 11 by 17 inch baking pan. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vegetable, canola, or olive oil. I'm using olive oil, of course. I'm going to take my hand and I'm just going to spread the oil around the baking pan. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 325 degrees. Here we have our marinated ribs. Of course, I let them marinate overnight. Place your rib pieces into the baking pan. Make sure everything is nice and even. I'm going to pour the rest of that marinade on top of the rib pieces. Okay, here I have some aluminum foil. I'm going to line 2 sheets of the aluminum foil and I'm going to place that on top of the baking pan. Make sure you bring the aluminum foil around the edges to seal. Here I have a large fork. I'm going to take the fork and I'm going to poke holes at the top of the aluminum foil. This is going to allow some of the steam to escape during the baking process. Next, I'm just going to take my hands and I'm just going to make sure that the aluminum foil is sealed around the edges of the baking pan. Now they are ready to be baked. Place this into a preheated 325-degree oven on the middle rack. Bake this for 3 hours. Alright, it's been about 3 hours now and our ribs should be done. I'm going to go ahead and remove this out of the oven. Next, I'm just going to allow some of the steam to escape, so I'm going to lift up the aluminum foil from the edge of the baking pan. And I'm just going to let that sit for about 30 seconds to 1 minute. And from there, lift off the aluminum foil from the baking pan. Now, how to tell if the ribs are done? If you touch them with your fingers and they're nice and soft. And if you take a fork and you can insert it into the ribs very easily, the ribs are done. Let this cool for about 20 to 30 minutes or until the ribs are warm. Alright, I've placed my cooked ribs into this large bowl. Add your bourbon sauce into the bowl. Now I'm trying to figure this out here. I was going to try to stir, but the ribs are going to be falling apart. So I have a pastry brush and I'm just going to take the bourbon whiskey and I'm just going to brush the ribs with the bourbon sauce using the pastry brush. So it'll probably be better if you put these on a chopping board or just put them back into the baking pan and just brush the ribs with the bourbon sauce. And once done, the bourbon ribs are ready to be served. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Bourbon glazed ribs, made by a New Orleans native. If you like my channel, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell button if you want to be notified of my videos. I have an official website for all of my recipes, including this one. Go to www.charliethecookandrews.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter under the name Charlie the Cook Andrews. Stay tuned as Charlie's Taste Test is coming up next. Can't wait. Now it's time to go ahead and take a bite. Mmm. Oh yes. This is my new favorite kind of rib right here. I mean, the ribs are nice and tender, juicy. It has like a sweet and savory combination along with that bourbon. You can taste the bourbon, except for that all the alcohol in it has been completely evaporated. So you have just the flavor of the bourbon. Y'all, absolutely delicious. You're gonna literally forget about the barbecue ribs. Barbecue? Man, you better go fix them bourbon ribs. Anyways, I'm just playing with y'all. All you gotta do is try the recipe. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, have a good one. Peace.